New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
New Thought Media Network is pleased to present The Inclusive Church, Ideas and Resources for Leaders of Multicultural Ministries. The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Tuesdays at 12 noon Mountain Time. Join Tracy and her guests as they go deep and share practical tips and resources you can use in your ministry. And now let's explore the Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here, and we are here on the Inclusive Church. Inclusive, what does that mean to you? And church, what does that mean to you? I hope it means the same thing to you as it means to me, that in our spiritual communities where we gather to learn and to practice and to teach and to model spiritual principles, that we can include, engage, and serve all kinds of people. So glad that you are with us today. Hey, Wayne, and hello, Shay, and if some of the others of you who I can see are there on different channels and networks, if you want to put your name and location in the chat or in the comment section, that would be great. It is not a requirement, but it would be great if you did. Good afternoon to you as well, Anita. And part of the reason I ask you to do that is so that you know where it is. And as we are going through the session today, our time together, if you have a comment or if you have an example or if you have a question, please put it in the chat or in the comments, depending on which of the platforms you are participating from. So it is the month of June, and June is among many, many, many designations. June is Pride Month, And in the context of the inclusive church, I wanted to spend a little time talking about and thinking about what can we do and what things are we doing that allow us to effectively include people who identify themselves in one of the many categories in the designation LGBTQ plus. And that's important to talk about. Well, it's important to talk about the same way we talk about including any other identity group. So, as some of you know, when I don't have a featured guest and I'm really just helping you enhance your toolkit, I try to keep those like toolkit sessions to 30-ish minutes, maybe 35, but not go 45 or 50 minutes because I know you. And I know you'll be like, Tracy, we are tired of hearing your voice. Like, yeah, you're smart and everything. You're brilliant, but we don't like you that much. So today I will be doing that as well, shooting for 30 to 35 minutes. And in order to do that, what I thought about was what are some of the tips that I think are really important, either because I've experienced things in my own home spiritual community along the way, different ones, or because I've talked with people who have either faced some issues and challenges, or they've shared with me some really cool things that they've done. So I've got, I think, 7 tips for you in 30 minutes or less. And if I have time after that, I will share some other very specific examples of applying these tips and other conversations I have found myself in recent weeks related to this topic. So the topic is, how can we include effectively and respectfully people who identify LGBTQ plus? So tip number 1 is educate yourself. Educate yourself. And in the 21st century, none of us have any excuse for not knowing basic information really about any identity group, because from social media, from the internet, from all kinds of resources that we can easily access, we can educate ourselves on basic information. So if you are still confused, like, wait a minute, LGBTQ plus, like, I don't know what any of those initials or those letters mean, that is your fault. That is your fault. And I'm not really fussing, but when there are things like that, that's a quick Google search. That's a quick, let me ask someone in my spiritual community who just used LGBTQ plus. Let me just ask them, what does that stand for? And so, so the first one is educate yourself on the basics. And, what is Pride Month and why do we have Pride Month? And since when did it become a whole month? And, all of those are just basic questions that you can educate yourself about. Once you've done your basic education, tip number 2 or recommendation number 2 is that then you ask for advice or you ask for coaching. So you have some basic information and then you're not understanding really the distinction maybe between bisexual and transgender. For whatever reason, you read up on it and you were confused. So ask for advice or ask for coaching from someone in your spiritual community who you trust. Or maybe you don't have someone in your spiritual community that you know would be able to educate you in this regard. And so what do? You find someone else, just like you would with any other topic. You go to a colleague who you trust. You go to, a practitioner or a minister who is a leader in your community, not because they are a lesbian, not because they are gay, but because you know they have information that will help you be respectful or understand more. So a lot of times as leaders in our communities, we slip into this false belief that everybody expects us to know the answers to everything. Some days I don't even know the answer to how I'm really feeling and what's most important in my own individual life. How am I going to know the answer to every question about every identity group? I'm not. So, number one, educate yourself. Number two, based on what you learn or find out and have questions about, then ask for advice or ask for coaching. Please, please don't wait until you put your foot in your mouth, which we're all going to do at some point. But don't wait for that. If there's something you're unsure of, ask or ask for coaching. Number three, please remember that LGBTQ plus, right? They're really LGBTQ plus. We're talking about 5+ groups, identity groups. So as one designation, LGBTQ plus, obviously that group is not monolithic because we know there are 5+ other identity groups being referred to with one designation. So that group is not monolithic. Everyone who is identifying as transgender is not going to know, understand, agree with, or behave in the same way as people in the bigger identity group who identify as queer or as lesbian. And then to make it even more interesting, even within each of those designated groups, they are not monolithic either. So if you self-identify as a white person, you know that you don't think just like every other white person. You have not had the same experiences as every other white person. And you are shocked when people ask you questions or think that you would know what everybody else thinks who shares that one category or identity with you. So that is true for every group. And it is true, therefore, with any of the individual groups and the designation LGBTQ plus altogether. So remember, no group is monolithic. 3 down, 4 to go. And I'm over. When you see me looking over here, I'm looking at the clock because I really do want to give you 7 or 8 things to remember, but I definitely don't want to go more than 35 minutes. So number 4, speaking of this kind of umbrella or large designated group, LGBTQ plus, please at least understand what each of those initials stand for. Now, I mentioned that with number one, making sure you educate yourself. But even more specifically, it would be helpful for you as a leader in an inclusive spiritual community to be comfortable saying and explaining to others: L is for lesbian, G is for gay, B is for bisexual, T is for the category transgender, Q is for queer. Sometimes you will have people say the Q is for questioning, but most of the time in 2024, the majority of the time people are going to refer to Q as queer. And the plus refers to the fact that there are many other groups based on sexual orientation or gender identity that someone might self-identify with, and explain that to you. That these are not the only, there are not only 5 categories, but these are the 5 that are most generally referred to. So you want to be able to speak to that, not for 20 minutes, but in 1 minute. If someone did ask you what are each of those groups or what do each of the initials stand for, I really do keep that as a separate tip. And Anita, you're right that we are beginning to see more and more LGBTQ2, with the 2 representing Two-Spirit. And from Native American or American Indian and indigenous cultures. And so that may be new for some of you. And I would go back to tip number 1. Look up what is Two-Spirit in the context of talking about sexual orientation and gender identity. So that's 4. Number 5. Differentiate between rights and respect. So here's what I mean by this. So often in our spiritual communities, when you have members or participants in events you're doing, and you say, oh, we're a welcoming and affirming church, right? Or we are proud to welcome LGBTQ people into our community. What can happen, and has happened to so many people I've talked to, is that they get a lot of pushback from their community saying, this is political. Why are you supporting the gay agenda? Why are you trying to tell me that I shouldn't vote for this legislation? And they'll describe whatever legislation may be up for dialogue and debate in their state or in their part of the country. And so, this really goes back to the very, very basics around being an inclusive spiritual community. Number 1, you do have to be able to go back to your mission and your spiritual teaching. What is it that your denomination or your faith practices and principles tell you about treating everyone with love, treating everyone with respect, treating everyone as a child of God, treating everyone as an equal expression of the divine? However you talk about that in your community, you must be able to bring that in all the time. And you you would be wise if you were able to articulate in a very short comment that whatever your position is, whatever your spiritual community's position, not your personal position, what is your spiritual community's position about rights for everyone and treating people respectfully? So much of the time, when people are confused and thinking you are, or accusing you of being political as it relates to the LGBTQ plus community, then they are being triggered by or confused by something that's in the news or on the political docket, like right now or right then. And often for spiritual leaders, you want to start with respect. You want to start with your spiritual values and then go to respect for all people, including you rude person who is being exclusive, right? But of course, you wouldn't say that out loud. You would just be thinking it in your head. I have to respect you, so I'm going to respect everybody else. So, but be prepared to have that conversation about being respectful, because it's going to come up in so many examples, in so many challenges, in so many complaints that people have. Is what you are saying a respectful way, a way to demonstrate respect for a peer, for a colleague, for another child of God? If everyone is the face of God, if this is God standing in front of you, or spirit standing in front of you, is that how you show respect? And depending on your background, you might choose to use love instead of respect. Is this a way, what you're suggesting, is this a way to demonstrate our commitment to love all people? So this is a very important thing for you to be able, as a leader, to differentiate between, we're not on the picket line for, we're not going down and marching for civil rights or human rights. I'm going to go back to that in a minute. But to be able to articulate that we are living our spiritual values as it relates to loving everyone. And that means everyone is welcome. That means that we are respectful of everyone who comes into our community or participates in any event. So what I want to go back to is that statement I made. Like, as I'm talking to someone, I might actually say, depending on what the conversation is, we are not in this moment talking about going down and participating in a march or protesting. I may use that if I'm trying to make a specific example, but I am not saying, please be clear, I am not saying that it's not appropriate to participate in a march or a protest. So depending on your community, how actively engaged you are in the community outside of your spiritual community, then that could be a part of your outreach. That could be a part of your community's pattern of advocacy. And it would be fine. But typically in these conversations that you're going to have as a leader in your spiritual community, you are in that moment talking about one-on-one behavior. You're not talking about policy and legislation and law. So Shay posts that this could be helpful to somebody in their last position at a local community that Shay rolled out an LGBTQ ministry. However, during this process, I realized I was not qualified to do this, so I employed a trans-identifying person to help me with it. And I love where, Shay, where you go next with this. What was needed, hearing from, like tip number 2, getting coaching and getting advice from people who know more than I might know, right? So it's a both and, not an either or. You actually have to show up fully as yourself, and you also are smart to involve and engage others who may have more information or more experience, et cetera, et cetera. And the more you have participation and collaboration with people from different aspects and different identity groups, the better off you are going to be. So let's see, number 6. Number 6. My note here says year-round education and engagement. And the reason that I kind of chuckle as I see that that's the next point that I wanted to share, or the next tip, is because almost everyone I know, not everyone who identifies as LGBTQ that I know, but many of the people I know, especially if they're ministers or if they're professional speakers or if they are consultants, during the month of June, they can hardly breathe because they want to help educate people. They want to respond to requests to speak at events. And then July 1st, nobody has anything to say to them anymore, except, hi, or, in passing. And so, the same thing often happens with Black History Month and Black people who are leaders or speakers or ministers are asked to speak because it's Black History Month. And then throughout the rest of the year, it's like, Black? Oh, why would we be talking about that? It's not Black History Month. So please don't do that as it relates to Pride Month either. So yes, you want to have some education opportunity. Yes, you may want to have some entertainment or social engagement that is related to the theme of Pride Month. And don't let that be the only time during the year that your membership and your leadership, don't let Pride Month be the only time that the topic of LGBTQ comes up. Don't let that be the one time during the year where you invite a speaker who is transgender to come and speak, even if you don't have them speaking about being transgender, but you want to have somebody on your platform who is transgender because it's Pride Month. Stop it. Stop it. If you are not going to have visibility on your platform throughout the year for people who identify as LGBTQ+, then don't do it during Pride Month, really. You would be better off addressing the topic, but not featuring someone and like putting them out on display. Don't do the display thing. It's too performative. And I'll be honest with you, one of the reasons I don't have a featured guest, even though later in the month I will and we'll be talking about some of this, but one of the reasons I don't have a featured guest today is to provide some basic foundation without having someone who identifies as LGBTQ plus on display. Because these tips that I'm sharing are things that we all need to keep in mind this month as we choose how we activate our commitment and demonstrate our commitment throughout the year. And number 7, on the platform, who are the people? This is really just kind of an extension of number 6. Number 7, on the platform throughout the year, what are you doing that demonstrates that people who identify as LGBTQ plus are welcome, are affirmed, are really a part of your community? And it is sometimes a little tricky because you don't always, with every person, identify their identity groups. Every time I get on the platform, people, if they can see me, will see that I'm a woman of color, will see that I am a Black woman mostly. And that's great because it's visible. But with sexual orientation and gender identity, it's not always visible. It's not typically visible. So how do you manage that? And that then connects us to the question that a lot of people are talking about now with, do we have everyone who's on the platform use their pronouns when they are identifying themselves? So they identify their name and their pronouns, because you cannot tell just by looking at someone. And it would be easy to make a mistake. And secondly, even if that becomes comfortable, it allows people for whom it's not obvious to just be doing what everyone else is doing. So I am at 32 minutes. I promised you I would try to keep it to 30 or 35. So let me tell you how else we're going to engage in this topic this month. So there will be another session later in the month where there is a conversation. We'll be talking about using the use of pronouns and what are some of the mistakes that people have been making. What are some of the challenges that people in our communities have brought forward about using pronouns or requiring the use of pronouns? We're going to talk about some real life conversations that I've had with people, even just about the designations. If you remember, I said one of the tips is to remember that none of the communities are monolithic. And I recently had a very powerful conversation with a man who said to me, I'm gay, but they cannot make me use queer. Because when I was growing up, queer wasn't the insult of all insults. That was a fighting term. And now, the young people are using it, but they can't make me use it. So we're going to talk a little bit about language and words, and we're going to have a conversation later in the month specifically about how you might navigate having someone who is transgender in your community as they are transitioning. So please join me on another Tuesday at noon Mountain Time right here on the New Thought Media Network. It's going to be very interesting. And of course, one week we will be talking about Juneteenth and what the history of Juneteenth is and why that might be important to address or to introduce in your spiritual community. My name is Tracy Brown. You've been watching The Inclusive Church right here on the New Thought Media Network. I will see you again soon.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network, come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.